The live television broadcast revealed a trial that exposed the shocking truth behind the scenes. The night started out like any other for the millions of viewers tuning in to watch their favorite late-night comedy show. The iconic opening theme song played. The host walked onto the stage in his signature style, and the audience applauded enthusiastically. It all seemed normal, with political jokes, cultural commentary, and a touch of self-deprecating humor. But as the night wore on, something felt different. In the middle of the show, the presenter deviated from the usual script and looked directly at the camera. And now, he announced, "Let's talk about young Barron Trump." A photo of Barron, then 18, appeared on the screen. The audience smiled, unsure of which direction the joke would take. The presenter began with a light joke, mocking Barron's appearance and manners. But in a matter of moments, the tone changed. The jokes became personal, criticizing his appearance, behavior, and private life. The audience laughed, but some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For a moment, even the presenter seemed to hesitate, as if realizing he might be crossing a line. But instead of backing down, he ratcheted up the jokes. The audience responded with nervous laughter, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. In Florida, Barron was scrolling through his social media feed when clips of the segment began to appear. His initial reaction was disbelief. Watching it again, he felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. The laughter, the cruel comments, it all felt like a painful reflection of his deepest insecurities. It wasn't just a joke. It felt calculated, malicious. The online backlash was immediate. Hashtags like #TooFar and #DefendBarron began to trend. Critics and supporters of the show engaged in heated debates, with some defending the segment as a joke and others condemning it as a personal attack. Social media amplified the story within hours, replaying the clip as comments poured in. For Barron, who had spent much of his life shielded from the public eye, this was a new and disconcerting experience. He had grown up watching his family navigate scandals and controversies, but had always kept a low profile, out of the spotlight. Now he was in the spotlight and unsure how to handle it. His family quickly mobilized to his defense. Melania Trump, always protective, was the first to speak out. "My son is not a public figure," he declared in a statement. "Children should be off limits no matter who their parents are." This statement received support from followers and even some critics, but it was not enough to contain the wave of jokes that continued to grow. Barron spent the next few days avoiding the news, hoping the attention would die down. But it didn't decrease. The clip continued to circulate, laughter echoing with each replay. He began to wonder if this was simply the price of being a Trump, if being ridiculed was an inevitable consequence of his last name. But something about the situation didn't feel right. It wasn't just a passing joke or a moment of misjudgment. It was an intentional decision to humiliate an 18-year-old who had done nothing to deserve such scrutiny. And the more Barron thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't let it go. He watched the segment one last time, analyzing every joke, every word. Then he turned off his phone and sat quietly, pondering. If I don't stand up, who will? But standing up meant entering a world he had avoided for years, a world of scrutiny, controversy, and relentless judgment. Was he ready for what was to come? Barron spent the next few days in introspection. He couldn't escape the constant buzz, the news dissecting the jokes, the viral social media posts debating his reaction, even the unsolicited advice from strangers. But amid all the noise, he remained silent. It wasn't that he had nothing to say. He just wasn't sure anyone would care to listen. The Trump family's Palm Beach mansion was unusually tense. Discussions raged among lawyers and legal experts, each with their own opinions on how to handle the situation. Some believed that ignoring the controversy was the best strategy, while others argued for a public response. "This will pass, Barron," a family friend said over coffee. "These things happen all the time. Don't pay any more attention." But Barron was not convinced. Sitting on the family's porch, looking out at the ocean, he replayed the events in his mind. The audience's laughter echoed like thunder, growing louder with each memory. It wasn't just the embarrassment. It felt deeper, more malicious. The turning point came during a quiet moment with his mother, Melania. Ever loving and level-headed, she had been his pillar of support throughout the ordeal. She found him alone in his office, staring thoughtfully at his computer. Without saying a word, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to fight this battle alone," she said. "But if you want to, you won't be alone." Her words resonated in Barron's mind. For the first time, he realized the weight of his own decision. It wasn't just about standing up for himself. It was about setting a precedent. If he let it slide, it would send a message that public figures, even young ones like himself, were legitimate targets for ridicule. And what would happen to others who faced bullying without a platform to speak out? That night, after hours of contemplation, Barron walked into the dining room where his father's former lawyer was sitting. The man was an imposing presence, with slicked-back gray hair and a neatly organized briefcase at his side. He looked up as Barron entered, raising a curious eyebrow. "I've made my decision," Barron said, his voice firm despite the weight of his words. "I want to sue." The former lawyer leaned back in his chair, studying the young man across from him. "You understand what this means, don't you? It's not just about the jokes. The media is going to dissect your life, your story, everything." He paused, looking Barron in the eye. "Are you ready for that?" "I've thought about this a lot," Barron replied, holding the lawyer's gaze. "And I know it won't be easy, but it's not just about me. It's about showing people that there is a limit and that crossing it has consequences." The former lawyer smiled, a small smile that broke his stoic expression. "Very well," he said. "Then let's make them understand." The lawsuit was filed within days, and news of Barron's decision spread like wildfire. The media pounced on the story, analyzing every detail of the case and speculating about the outcome. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal battle, it was a cultural one. Some praised Barron as a symbol of resistance to bullying, while others criticized him for being sensitive, accusing the Trump family of attention-seeking. But for Barron, opinions no longer mattered. He had made his decision, and there was no going back. As the lawsuit gathered steam, the question lingered. Would this battle lead to the justice Barron sought? Or would it only intensify the spectacle he had worked so hard to avoid? News of Barron Trump's lawsuit against the network spread like wildfire. Within hours, it became the top story on social media. Headlines ranged from supportive to critical. Barron Trump Strikes Back and Late Night Comedy on Fire were among the most talked about titles. Social media became a battleground, with hashtags like #StandWithBarron and #SatireIsFreeSpeech competing for dominance. Public reaction was deeply divided. On one side were those who applauded Barron for standing up for himself, calling the lawsuit a necessary step toward holding powerful media figures accountable. "This isn't about politics," read one viral tweet. "It's about basic decency. Leave the kids out of this." Others, however, saw the lawsuit as an overreaction, accusing the Trump family of exploiting the situation for attention. "Comedy is comedy," argued one commentator during a radio segment. "If we start censoring jokes, where does it end?" The network initially tried to downplay the controversy. A spokesperson released a carefully crafted statement reaffirming the network's commitment to free speech and humor, while offering a vague apology for any offense caused. But damage control was not enough. Critics noted that the apology failed to address the real issue: the humiliation of an 18-year-old who deliberately avoided the spotlight. The host, known for his irreverent humor, became the center of attention. Speculation about his reaction grew, with rumors of heated backstage arguments and tension between him and network executives. When he finally broke his silence during an episode of the show, his tone was far from conciliatory. "I make jokes," he said, pointing to the camera with a smile. "Some people can handle it, some people can't." The audience laughed, but the moment felt forced, awkward. Online, the clip was dissected relentlessly, with many calling it a non-apology. As the lawsuit gained momentum, the story began to take on a life of its own. Legal analysts debated whether Barron's case had merit. Some argued that satire was protected by the First Amendment and that the lawsuit would eventually fail. Others pointed to leaked emails from the show's producers suggesting a deliberate effort to provoke, which could be a game-changer. Amid the chaos, Barron remained largely out of the spotlight. He avoided interviews, choosing to let his legal team handle the public narrative. But the pressure was weighing on him. Friends who had once called to check on him pulled away, unsure how to handle his sudden notoriety. Strangers approached him in public, offering words of encouragement or insults. Still, Barron refused to give up. "It's not about winning or losing," he confided to his lawyer during a late-night meeting. "It's about making sure people know that this kind of behavior is not acceptable." The network, however, was not about to give in easily. Its lawyers mounted an aggressive defense, portraying the lawsuit as an attack on free speech. They painted Barron as sensitive, someone who couldn't handle the scrutiny that came with being part of a high-profile family. But leaked emails from the show's producers, revealed in the early stages of the case, told a different story. Phrases like, "We're going to take him down," and "We're going to push the envelope," painted a picture of deliberate malice. And the public began to change its tune. Even some of the show's most loyal fans began to question the ethics of targeting a teenager. As the world speculated about the outcome of the lawsuit, Barron's legal team worked furiously behind the scenes. The former lawyer's office was transformed into a war room, with walls covered in documents, timelines, and notes mapping out every angle of the case. It wasn't just about winning. It was about building a case that would stand up to the network's powerful defense. The show's producers' emails were a goldmine of evidence. What initially seemed like a few offhand comments revealed something much darker upon closer inspection. The tone of the correspondence was unmistakably aggressive, with phrases like, "He's an easy target," and "let's push the envelope and see what happens." One email even mentioned how the controversy could boost ratings, describing it as a potential PR win. When Barron's attorney shared these findings with him, the young man's expression hardened. "They didn't just make a mistake," he said. "They planned this. They knew exactly what they were doing." The legal team decided to file a motion to include the emails as crucial evidence in the lawsuit. The network's attorneys immediately moved to block their admission, arguing that the emails were taken out of context and did not represent the purpose of the segment. But the judge ruled in Barron's favor, allowing the emails to be included in the case. The decision sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. News of the emails spread through the press, triggering a new wave of outrage. Public opinion began to shift even further in Barron's favor. Even those who had initially dismissed the lawsuit as frivolous found it difficult to defend the producer's actions. The network faced mounting pressure, not just from the public but also from its advertisers. Brands began pulling sponsorships from the show, unwilling to be associated with the controversy. Inside the network, chaos reigned. Producers and executives held emergency meetings, trying to contain the crisis. Fingers were pointed, blame was fired, and morale was low. The show's once irreverent host had become a liability. Despite his defiant public persona, internal reports revealed that he had become increasingly isolated, both professionally and personally. The host finally addressed the controversy during an episode of the show, but his response fell flat. His tone was defensive, his jokes forced. "These are strange times," he said, gesturing to the camera. "When comedians are sued for doing their jobs." The audience laughed, but the moment felt hollow, a pale echo of the energy the show used to command. Meanwhile, Barron remained focused. His days were consumed by statements, strategy meetings, and media updates, but the weight of the case was taking its toll. He spent long hours in solitude, dealing with the enormity of what he had unleashed. Every now and then, he would find himself reading messages from strangers, some supportive, some vitriolic. One message, though, touched him deeply. It was from a mother in Kansas who thanked him for his courage. Her teenage son had been brutally bullied at school, and she saw Barron's struggle as a beacon of hope. "You are showing him that he doesn't have to stay silent," the message read. Barron kept it, returning to it whenever doubts arose. Despite the mounting stress, Barron refused to give in. He saw the case not just as a fight for himself, but as a broader statement against a culture that too often prioritized shock value over human decency. But as the case progressed, the stakes grew higher, and the question lingered. Would Barron's evidence be enough to hold the network accountable? Or would the weight of his influence overturn its resolution? The day of the trial was unlike anything Barron had ever experienced. Rows of reporters and spectators lined the steps of the Miami courthouse, microphones and cameras trained on every door. The energy was palpable, and Barron felt its weight with every step as he walked toward the building alongside his legal team. Dressed in a suit, he tried to channel the calm his father was known for, but his hands betrayed his nervousness. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. The space was packed with legal analysts, journalists, supporters, and skeptics, all eager to witness the outcome. Barron sat silently at the plaintiff's table, his eyes fixed on the polished wood of the table in front of him. Across the room, the network's high-powered legal team appeared relaxed, exchanging casual laughs as if it were just another day in court. The host's notable absence quickly became a media talking point. The opening arguments were intense. The network's lawyers framed the case as an attack on free speech, describing their client as a comedian exercising his constitutional rights. "Satire has always been a part of our democracy," the lead attorney proclaimed. His voice echoed around the room. "To restrict it is to lose one of our most powerful tools for holding the powerful accountable." But Barron's team countered with precision. "This is not satire," the attorney stated firmly. This was a calculated decision to attack a young man who had done nothing to deserve such ridicule. This is about intent, and the evidence will show that this was not a harmless joke. This was a deliberate act, intended to humiliate. The tension in the room was palpable as the trial progressed. The turning point of the proceedings came when the producer's infamous emails were introduced into evidence. The words "push the envelope" and and let's make him burn were projected onto a large screen for all to see. Gasps echoed around the room, and the judge's expressions changed from neutral to uncomfortable. The defense fought to downplay the emails, arguing they were taken out of context. The nature of comedy is to provoke, the lawyer insisted. These discussions were part of the creative process, not a plan of attack. But the prosecution's next statement cemented the argument. A former producer of the program, who had left under uncomfortable circumstances, was called to testify. She was nervous, fidgeting with her hands, but her voice steadied as she related her experience. "We knew it was dangerous," he admitted. There were concerns about targeting Barron Trump, especially since he was not a public figure in his own right, but those concerns were dismissed. The superiors wanted something that would go viral. That was the goal. His testimony resonated like a punch. Even the defense team seemed momentarily shaken. The courtroom fell silent as the implications became clear. This wasn't just poor judgment. It was a calculated decision driven by ratings and shock value. Barron's moment came when he was called to the witness stand. The courtroom fell silent as he walked to the stand. His tall frame seemed even more imposing under the weight of the moment. He took a deep breath, his hands gripping the edges of the bench. The questions were direct. "Why did you decide to proceed with this case?" the prosecutor asked. Barron hesitated, his voice quiet but thick with emotion when he finally spoke. "Because this isn't just about me. It's about drawing a line. If someone like me, someone with resources, a family that supports me, can be treated this way, what does that mean for everyone else? For kids in school or people without a voice? This isn't about jokes. It's about basic respect." His words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the jury and the audience. Even the network's lawyers seemed uncertain how to respond. As the trial progressed, the drama in the courtroom reached a fever pitch. The defense presented its own witnesses, including industry experts who testified about the importance of satire and comedy. But the damage had already been done. The emails, the production company's testimony, and Barron's heartfelt words had left a lasting impression. But as closing arguments approached, the ultimate question lingered. Would the jury side with Barron's fight for accountability? Or would the network's defense of free speech prevail? The jury's deliberation seemed to take an eternity. With every minute, the tension inside and outside the courtroom grew. Barron sat quietly at the lawyer's table, trying to maintain his composure, even as his foot tapped nervously on the floor. His mother, sitting behind him, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it reminded him that he was not alone. Finally, after nearly 7 hours, the jury returned to the courtroom. The atmosphere was electric. Every movement was amplified in the silence. The jurors filed in, holding the paper that would decide the outcome of one of the most publicized trials in recent history. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," the spokesman announced, his voice firm and clear. A wave of emotion swept through the room. Barron let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His lawyers exchanged small smiles. Their hard work and meticulous strategy had paid off. Behind him, his mother gently squeezed his shoulder. The network's legal team, on the other hand, sat in stunned silence. Their arrogant confidence had crumbled. The jury awarded Barron significant damages, not just for defamation but also for emotional distress. It wasn't about the money, though. For Barron, the victory was symbolic. It sent a message that even those in the media spotlight deserved basic human decency. Outside the courtroom, reporters crowded as Barron walked out into the midday light. Cameras clicked, microphones positioned themselves, and questions came from all directions. Barron's lawyer addressed the press first, highlighting the importance of the case and what it meant for media responsibility. Then, to everyone's surprise, Barron himself stepped forward. "This case was never about silencing anyone," he began. His voice was calm but resolute. "It's about responsibility. We all have a responsibility to think about the impact of our words, especially when those words have the power to hurt. I hope this reminds everyone that respect should never be optional." The speech was brief, but loaded with weight. Social media exploded with reactions, many applauding Barron's courage and maturity. The phrase "respect is never optional" quickly became a trending hashtag, with users from all walks of life sharing their own stories of bullying and mistreatment. The network, however, was in retreat. The trial exposed the dark side of its operations, and the leaked emails became a focal point of criticism. Advertisers pulled their sponsorships, and the show's ratings plummeted. Under pressure, the network issued a second, more sincere apology during a show. "I crossed a line," the host admitted, his voice thick with regret, "and I have learned from it. To Barron Trump, I sincerely apologize." To Barron, The apology seemed overdue. But it was no longer about him. It was about the precedent the case had set. The network announced changes to its policies, implementing stricter rules for its content, and creating oversight boards to ensure future accountability. In the weeks following the verdict, Barron retreated from the spotlight, choosing to focus on his personal life. But he didn't let the experience fade. He began quietly working with anti-bullying organizations, using his platform to advocate for those who lacked the resources or visibility to fight bullying. Letters poured in from strangers across the country, parents thanking him for standing up, teenagers sharing their own experiences with bullying, and even former critics admitting that their perspective had changed. One letter from a Montana teacher touched him deeply. "Your courage taught my students a lesson that no textbook ever could," he wrote. "Thank you for reminding us that even the softest voices can make a big difference." The effects of the trial extended far beyond the victory. It illuminated conversations about the responsibilities of the media and the power dynamics between public figures and those they influence. Most importantly, it reminded people of the value of empathy, even in a world that often seems lacking in it. But for Barron, the greatest victory was not the court ruling or the public recognition. It was the realization that he could make a difference, not by following someone else's path, but by standing his ground alone. Barron's journey was not just a trial. It was a defining moment that transcended his personal struggle. For many, it became a symbol of resilience, proof that even the softest voices could be heard. The case put him in front of a mirror he had long avoided, but instead of hiding, he sat up straight, turning the attention into a platform for change. In the weeks and months following the trial, the impact of the case continued to resonate. Schools held discussions on cyberbullying and the consequences of words, inspired by Barron's decision to stand up. Anti-bullying organizations reported a surge in donations, with many crediting the high-profile case for bringing attention to their work. Conversations that had once seemed theoretical about the line between free speech and accountability became personal and urgent for millions of people. For Barron, life began to return to a new normal. He enrolled in college, focusing on his studies while quietly continuing his advocacy. He kept a folder of letters and emails from people who reached out to thank him, a reminder of the purpose behind the fight. Every now and then, he would reread them, reaffirming the purpose behind the fight. But the lessons of his experience extended far beyond the courtroom. He had learned that standing up for himself was not just about protecting personal dignity. It was about setting an example for others. By taking on a media giant, he had shown that no one, no matter how powerful, was above accountability. And in the process, he had redefined what it meant to be a Trump, not through controversy or conflict, but through compassion and strength. The moral of the story was clear. Words matter. They have the power to hurt, to heal, to divide, and to unite people. And while freedom of speech is a cornerstone of society, it comes with an equally important responsibility: to use that freedom wisely and with empathy. As Barron reflected on his journey, one thought remained constant: the importance of standing up, even when the odds seem insurmountable. "It's not about the size of the fight," he said in an interview. "It's about the reason behind it. If you're standing up for what's right, you've already won." So for those watching, the challenge is clear. What will you stand for? Will you use your voice to make the world a kinder, more compassionate place? Whether it's speaking out against injustice or offering support to someone in need, every action matters. If Barron's story has inspired you, let it be a call to action. Share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of the strength and courage within us all. Because the fight for dignity and respect doesn't just belong to Barron. It belongs to all of us. Together, we can ensure that the world becomes a place where friendship and responsibility are never optional.